Good morning and welcome to Southeastern 16. Joined by my co-host Chase Robinson, special guest Trey Wallace, good friend of mine, good friend of the show. We are going to talk about the college football playoffs rankings, which, boy, those stirred up a little bit of talk last night. We'll take your questions and your comments as they apply. We'll go first to our guest, Trey Wallace. Trey, first of all, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us. It is a busy time. I think it's busy time with you is redundant. I don't know of a time when you're not busy. But point is, thank you for joining us today. I'm going to start with you. Your reaction on what you saw from the committee last night, what stood out?
Yeah, good to be on, man. We were all texting back and forth in our little group about little college basketball last night. Then the rankings, were out there. And so that was an interesting conversation in our group. But, yeah, I think last night was interesting in a manner of, and I put out something regarding Indiana and BYU, and it's like my phone just blew up all night from Indiana and BYU fans and even Tennessee fans about, the Hoosiers and the Cougars, being ranked ahead of Tennessee and the Vols not moving up a spot. Now, we'll get to Georgia here in a minute and Miami. But, I think one of the things was in listening to Ward Manuel talk about it afterwards, who's the CFP chair, also the AD at Michigan. It's a little surprising that they're not paying attention, I think, to Tennessee's defense. And I think that was kind of the point I was trying to make, last night. You know how X and Twitter is and whatnot. My biggest thing was if you were going to put Indiana and BYU ahead of Tennessee, why not do it last week? It seems like you were trying to make up for something that you screwed up on last week, so you did it this week. Because the reason I give that is Indiana struggled with a Michigan team that's just not good. BYU, that game was bonkers. I loved it. But BYU escaped Utah, and I know everything that goes into the Holy War and in that rivalry. I get it. It was a fascinating game. But, and then I look at Tennessee. Tennessee went out and beat Mississippi State. They played the second half without their starting quarterback. And even, Ward Manuel said, that did not play into any of the factors. So the way I looked at it, I was like, okay, here's the arguments. Indiana beats a 5-4 Michigan team. BYU struggles against Utah, who's had a rotating quarterback all year long, and the defense is struggling. But then Tennessee takes care of Mississippi State. I mean, they beat them. The Mississippi State scored, it was 31 points against Georgia. Tennessee held an 18. Tennessee's defense. So I think one of my most interesting gripes about last night was that the committee screwed up last week in the first rankings, but then for some reason tried to make up for it this week. And you just did it at a time where Tennessee's coming off a win. So why make that decision? And you could have done it last week. I get that part, but why are we waiting until, the second rankings come out to make this case? And then, that was one thing. And then the Georgia thing where you're dropping 9 spots. I found that interesting to say the least, but that's kind of where I'm at. It's like, I know what we're looking at when it comes to, the automatic qualifiers. It's going to be a battle in the ACC, with SMU and Miami. Clemson still floating around. But you look at it right now too. I'm just going off, these teams, that they have played. Like I look at Indiana and they played one team with a winning record all year.
Wow.
And technically that would be Nebraska. And so I just, and then BYU, I know what BYU's done. Respect to BYU. But Tennessee has the best win out of those 3 teams against Alabama. And so that's why I was a little surprised. I wasn't taking up for Tennessee. I was more or less questioning the playoff committee and what they were thinking and why do it this week compared to last week. And so that was one of my, biggest takeaways. And it also sets up a scenario now where, if Georgia beats Tennessee on Saturday, and I know we'll get into that, the way that they had Tennessee ranked, we can call it an elimination game on Saturday. So I there's a lot of things. I know people get picky when it comes to these rankings. I know it's the second one and blah, blah, blah. I get that part. But if you pay attention to where we're going here, they're giving us tidbits on what to expect over the next 3 weeks. And that's what I found to be more curious than anything, Chris.
Yeah.
Chase?
To you, like, what is – and I know we saw we're learning their criteria. I feel like that's what we have to do every year this time when they start coming out with these play. We have to learn, because I feel like it changes every year, and I know it's a different group of people and whatnot, but I feel like the criteria for the playoff has changed for the last 10 years every year. So
Yes.
To you, like, what do you feel like is their criteria thus far? Because I feel like it's changed from last week to this week, and like, do you feel like it's just going to change all season? Or you feel like they're going to find something and stick with it?
I mean, we asked about strength of schedule last night, but then Ward Manuel kind of gave a half blank answer on does it really matter? And they talk about their resetting every week and looking at teams. It's like, I get you're looking at strength schedule from the past, kind of, but then you're resetting, where we're at, and it's like, okay, if we're going to do that, you have to pay attention to some of the schedules that these teams have already played. And that's what is kind of like, all right, wait a minute here. You're not making a lot of sense, because I can point out 7 games on Indiana's schedule that I think that they won. Congratulations. I think Indiana is a great story. I think Indiana has a really good offense. Also, at the same time, and I love him, I think people are caught up in the Kurt Cignetti story so much, and I think that that's getting a lot of favor compared to what's going on in the field. And I know that they have beaten teams. I get that part, Chase. But at the same time, man, you go to Columbus, and I'll be there next weekend. You go to Columbus and you get beat by 2 touchdowns, let's just say. And Indiana has a good shot to win that game. I watched Ohio State play in person against Penn State, 2 weeks ago. They're beatable. But I'm just saying, all this buildup of Indiana, and then they go to Ohio State and lose. Okay, well, you better treat them the way that you treated everybody else in the top 12 so far when it comes to a loss, and you better drop them out of the 12. You better put them at 13, 14, whatever, because I'm not buying I'm just not buying the strength of schedule thing. I think they are looking at that. I think when Ward Manuel Chase says that, we're just breaking down every game on Saturday and going forward from there, it's like, okay, all right, that's fine. Like, you're saying that, but, we've got thousands of people that watch these games on Saturday and can tell the difference. And, I think that we don't know what the criteria is every week. And I think that we're looking at these matchups, these head-to-heads, and, a lot of, like, you look at Alabama this weekend. Okay, you're coming off a big win over LSU. Now you're going to play Mercer. Okay, so, all right, you go out and beat Mercer, but let's just say a team behind them or something along those lines, gets a blowout win against an actual regular team in college football. No offense to Mercer. What does that do against Alabama? Yeah. So, again, Chase, man, I think it's up in the air every single week that they get in a room and talk about this.
Trey, I got a follow-up question for you, and then a couple thoughts of my own. First reminder, BetOnline, the world's most trusted betting platform, your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, BetOnline provides you with all the action and the ability to watch the games as they happen, with the largest selection of odds on everything from football, NBA, college basketball, NHL, UFC, and MMA. Head to BetOnline today. Get in on all the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. BetOnline, the game starts here. All right, first question. Have they released their strength of schedule? Because I know Sports Source Analytics is supposed to be the ones putting that together. I have an acquaintance over there, sent a message a couple of weeks ago, whether it was accidental or intentional, never got a response. Do we have they put the strength of schedule metrics out there for us to see? Did they refer to those last night? I'm just trying to figure out, all right, if that's do we have clarity on where that stands for everybody?
I saw a tweet from, I think it was McMurphy this morning, Brett McMurphy, and I don't know if it was those exact, from that website. But I'm looking for it right now. I haven't seen it just a straight up.
I haven't either. I Googled it a minute ago. That's why I'm asking, like, am I missing something?
Right. I have not seen it just okay, here it is. Here's what we're looking at. Here's where we're going week by week with these things. So no, I haven't seen it, and I find it interesting. And by the way, it looks like he actually deleted the tweet that was, and I don't know why, but whatever. Kudos to him for the strength of schedule. So maybe he doesn't even know anyway. So no, man, and that's what makes this thing, in my opinion, so intriguing, because we can look at the schedules. You can just look at a regular schedule, then go back and look at. It's kind of like what I did last night. I just went back and looked at who these teams have played and their records that are currently right now, and tried to put it together. So no,
Yeah.
and that part, the fact that it's Wednesday, November 13th, and we don't have strength of schedule rankings, I find that to be a little bit peculiar.
Well, it's going to lead to conspiracy theories, which maybe there's something there, maybe there's not. But here's the point: when you don't put it out there, what are people going to do? And look, you look at the rankings, okay? And by the way, and Chase can testify to this. I've spent a lot of my last 2 days coming up with stuff to say, all right, because somebody might say, well, the committee wasn't consistent on this thing. They cited strength of schedule. On this thing, they cited resume. On this thing, they cited strength of team. I don't have a problem with that, because with each team, something else might be loud, okay? But as I'm sorting through, doing my own research, trying to figure out, all right, how is this going to go down? How would I rank strength of schedules? How would I rank resumes? And I've come up with my own stuff. I won't get into the weeds on all of it, but Chase can tell you he's seen it. I did my homework. I didn't leave any stones unturned. I cannot find any rhyme or reason to what they are doing, except, boy, they love themselves some Big Ten.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at what was it? It was after Penn State, Ohio State, and you looked at where Penn State fell. I think it was 2 spots in the poll. Yeah. But what I saw at the Penn State, Ohio State game was James Franklin and the Nittany Lions scoring 6 points after the first quarter.
Yep.
And you're like, wait a minute. Okay, you're gonna drop only 2 or 3 spots. I get it. Okay, whatever. Oh, actually, I don't get it, but whatever your rationale is, it better be good, because you're getting paid, and this has a lot of implications. I think that the fact that, you even look at Georgia, and Georgia's had it, Georgia's gone to Texas and got a win. Sure, they lost at Alabama. Hell of a fight in the second half. That Alabama loss looks better and better, the way that the Tide are playing. And then you look at the loss to Ole Miss. Okay. Well, Ole Miss was a top 15 program, and you knew Ole Miss was ready to hit that spark, because that defense, in my opinion, is really good. I think Jackson Dart had kind of been waiting for that opportunity. You drop them 9 spots in the ranking, and you're like, okay, all right. Is this because we're starting to get Georgia fatigue? And we want a little bit more storylines out of the Bulldogs. So you put them just on the outside, but they got an opportunity this weekend to beat Tennessee. And then here's where I'll throw one at you too. What if Tennessee trots out there on Saturday and they're playing their backup quarterback and Gadsden Moore and not Nico? Okay, well, how much are you really putting into that win? Because what you've shown to me so far, the committee has, is you're not factoring in defense. Tennessee's got one of the best defenses in the country. But what you've shown this far is you're looking at the offense. There was no mention from Ward Manuel about Tennessee's defense last night. So what I'm getting at is that if Georgia beats Tennessee, let's just say by 14 points on Saturday because Tennessee's rolling with a backup, how much is that win really worth?
Trey, there's only one thing I can find as a commonality, and that's this. You seem to get 1 loss. It does not. I mean, and that's right now. Maybe the bar will shift to 2 as teams play more games. But right now, the bar is you kind of get grace for 1 loss, no matter who it was or where it was. Witness Notre Dame being in the playoff if it started today with a horrible loss to Northern Illinois, which has done nothing since. 2 losses seems to be okay, we don't care who beats you, what the circumstances were. Once you lose 2, you are sliding way down the pecking order. They went 0 loss and 1 loss, and not necessarily even in that order. There was no rhyme or reason to, all right, this team's unbeaten and this team's lost 1. It seems like their cutoff was once you have lost 2 games, you get shuffled to the bottom of the deck.
Well, yeah, and here comes the kicker. let's get to the Big Ten game, title game, or the SEC championship game. You got two teams that are rolling in there 10-2.
Yep.
Okay, one of them gets beat by, I'm just throwing it out there. Let's just say Texas A&M beats Georgia, whatever. I'll just throw a team by a field goal at the end. Okay, all right. Well, you just had two top 12 programs. Are you going to punish the other one for losing by 3 in a game where, by the way, you could have a team like Ole Miss who doesn't play for an SEC title sitting perfectly because they don't have to catch that L.
Yeah.
That's where it gets interesting to me. And the same thing can be said for the Big Ten title game. You know, let's just say you get Ohio State that goes and plays for a Big Ten title because they beat Indiana. And I'm not saying they will. I'm just saying if they do. And then you get Oregon. Okay. If Oregon beats Ohio State and they catch, another loss, does that drop them out? I'm saying what I'm getting at, these championship games, if I were some of these coaches and if I'm in a prime spot in the 12 or I'm sitting at either 13 or 14, like I would be happy if I was a team right now that had 2 losses that was sitting at 13 and 14 because you know that there's going to be some chaos in front of you that you could sneak in. Especially if we get something with these at-large berths, especially if we get something in the ACC. That, if SMU beats Miami in the ACC title game, okay, bye Miami. You're not getting in with 2 losses. You're done. So I just think, Chase and Chris, like we're sitting in a situation right now where, you thought it was chaotic during the second week, and I get a lot of this is for television, and I get a lot of this is for, okay, let's try to draw as many eyes as we can to this 12-team playoff. But at the end of the day, you're setting a precedent in what you're doing with your voting right now. And that's why I'm going to find it very curious if they start moving the goalposts as we get closer to the final rankings after championship Saturday.
Yeah, you bring up a good point there with, and I've heard this asked to me a lot this week. Like, if you're in a conference championship game, does that mean anything? If let's say, you get a third loss at a conference championship, like, is that going to mean anything to the committee that you were in that conference championship game?
Right. I mean, in that fascinating, and we haven't. I know it's not a sexy thing, but that Army-Navy situation, I would not want to be on the committee in that Army-Navy situation because let's just say Army beats Notre Dame next week. Somehow beats Notre Dame next week, which we've seen lesser teams beat Notre Dame. And I think Army is a pretty good football team. Then you get in that scenario where Army and Navy face off in the title game. And then a week later, they're going to face off in their quote unquote regular season finale. So are you telling me that what would happen is that Army would beat Notre Dame and then Army would win the AAC title game, but then lose to Navy in that regular season finale a week later, but they'd still be in the playoffs? Like, we're getting the chaos zone here. And by the way, that's not some crazy thing. That could happen. Like, that is sitting right in front of us. So I look at everything we're getting into, Chase, with these conference title games, man. And, in a perfect world, the committee is like, all right, Oregon, go take care of business in the title game in Indianapolis. Texas A&M or whoever, handle the SEC title game. We'll have to make a decision on how many teams from each conference gets in. And then if you really, really look at it, I don't want to put words in their mouth, but the ACC title game, and whether that's SMU versus Clemson or Miami, whatever, there's still a little bit of a long shot for Clemson, but I'm saying it's probably going to be Miami. Okay, Miami beats SMU in a very close football game. Now we're getting into the craziness. So yeah, I think that there are so many unknowns right now, Chase. That's what makes that first weekend of December so interesting to me. And you kind of hit it too. It's like if you're on the outside and not playing for a title, are you in a better position than you are if you were playing for a title? Crazy to think as of now.
Yeah. I put together just kind of a power rankings thing on my own from some mainstream computers, and also
can we make sure it's double checked?
Yeah, well, yeah, we probably ought to. But there's a point I'm getting at, okay, and it's where I cannot find the pattern. Just best teams regardless of losses, according to this. It went at Ohio State and Alabama in a virtual tie at 1, followed by Texas, Ole Miss, Notre Dame, Georgia, Oregon, Tennessee, Penn State, Miami, Indiana, South Carolina at 12, by the way. Those are just power rankings. Now, resume, this is how I've calculated it, and basically the way I made it work is you get a point for a win, and you get up to like 57 more points depending on who you played. And it's like an electoral system. You get the game whether you win it by 1 or whether you win it by 50. And a loss is -1, and you get points added to it. If it's a bad loss, you get a lot of points. If you lose to, at Georgia, it's almost a nothing. But here's how it went in this order: Oregon, BYU, Indiana, Georgia, Miami, Alabama, Penn State, Texas, Ohio State, Tennessee, Notre Dame, Ole Miss. Now, you will see a big overlap in the teams on both those. In other words, I think they came close to getting the 12 teams right, because you're seeing most of the teams that they picked are on both of those lists. What I don't understand is how they arrived there, okay? Because I think both strength of schedule and power rankings, Georgia and Alabama deserve to be several spots higher. Now, BYU was not in the power rankings list. The computers see them as a team that is massively overachieving, but the resume is really strong. I don't have as much of a problem with the Indiana being as high as it is, because, again, it's won all its games. But I think that the SEC is getting penalized for all these teams beating up on each other. The Big Ten teams, man, they basically, Oregon or Ohio State played a game. Ohio State, Penn State played a game. But a lot of these top teams don't play each other. And the Big Ten and all these other leagues are not nearly as strong, middle of the pack, as the SEC is. I mean, you've seen Tennessee get knocked off by Arkansas. You saw Alabama get knocked off by Vanderbilt. I think that is going underappreciated. I think if you're Penn State and Ohio State and some of these teams, you walk into these games where you're going to be a 20-something point favorite, and they're just going to be laughers. I don't think that what the SEC has done with the toughness of the league week in and week out is getting respected as much as it should be.
I put it to somebody last night. If South Carolina were in the Big Ten, they'd probably be in 3rd or 4th place right now.
Yep.
Probably be in 3rd or 4th place right now. I think South Carolina would beat Indiana in a head-to-head in a neutral site, just the way South Carolina is playing right now. But I'm just trying to give this a little bit of flavor to it. It's not Big Ten hate. It's been Big Ten realistic situation that we're in right now. And it's the fact that the teams are not performing well. Like, okay, I had somebody reply last night. It was like, okay, well, Indiana beat the defending national champions in Michigan. Who cares? The Michigan won national championship last year. That has no reckoning on what's going on this year. Michigan is a bad football team. They're 5-4 on the year. No, actually 5-5 on the year. Their offense is a mess. Blah, blah, blah. I could go on for days about Michigan. You can't. Ward Manuel called them big wins last night. Big win. He called Indiana beating Michigan a big win. And I'm sitting here, and he called BYU beating a bad Utah team. I get the rivalry part of it, but at the end of the day, this Utah team is not what everybody thought it would be, with Cam Rising entering the season. Okay. So you're calling those big wins. And when you really look at it, it's like, no, it's not. You beat Michigan. Michigan's bad this year. How is that bad? So I look at the analytics. I look at the rankings of where we're at right now. And again, this isn't intended to be a shot, but I would say that, Oregon is up here, obviously. Ohio State is in that spot where I think Ohio State's good. I sit there and watch Will Howard play right in front of me, watch a number of their games this season. But then you get to Penn State, and then you get to Indiana. And it's like, if none of these teams are playing, how are we supposed to get How are we supposed to get a reasoning that one team should be higher than the other in that conference? And that's what I look at. Okay, Indiana plays Ohio State. That's it. Like that's all you're going to get when it comes to seeing if Indiana is really, really good or not. And that's the problem. Whereas in the SEC, and I'm not trying to toot the SEC's horn when I say this, but what I am saying is that at the same time, you're getting critical matchups. You're getting good versus good, man. You're getting these type of scenarios where you can knock one out because, okay, even though they're eating their own, at least the competition is up to par. If Ole Miss was in the Big Ten, they'd be right there playing with Oregon for a conference title game. That in my opinion.
Trey, let me put it this way. Georgia's getting penalized. Georgia would not be in the playoff today for the sins of losing Alabama and an Ole Miss. I'm going to ask you, how would Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State, Indiana, how would all those teams have done in that spot? How many of those teams are going to go 0-2 against that gauntlet?
You're going to have one team, in my opinion, that would have gone to Ole Miss and won that game, and that's Oregon. And I'm not saying they would have won. I'm saying you've got an offense versus offense to kind of match up with each other. I love Oregon's defense. I do. I love what Dan Lanning has done. That is a prime team for a national championship. But if you put Ohio State, if you put Indiana, if you put Penn State, if you had them traveling to Oxford last weekend and playing that Ole Miss team with that defense and that offense, and you had a healthy Trey Harris or whatever, I think they catch L's, man. You can't. Again, I'm not. I hate to be like this towards Indiana, but I'm just having to be realistic here. What have you done? You've beat up on some bad football teams in the Big Ten, and I get it. You have got an opportunity next weekend, and I think you absolutely deserve to be in the top 10 of the college football playoff for what you've done and how you've won the games. I agree with that completely. But the fact that, and it's not Indiana's fault that the teams are bad in the Big Ten. I want to make that very, very clear. It's not their fault that that's the case. But the fact that it's going to be November, 21st, and Indiana is going to have their first real test of the season by a ranking standpoint, it's like,
Trey,
okay, if that's how we're going to play the game and that's how the committee wants to play the game, then if they lose that game to Ohio State, they need to be out. They need to be at 13-14 and then have to find a way to work themselves in at the end. They shouldn't drop to 10 or 11 or anything like that. And if Indiana fans, were realistic about this situation, which I'm sure there are a lot of them that are, they are very high. They're running on a high right now with this team. But I'm sorry, man. If you lose next weekend, you shouldn't be you can be in the conversation for a Big Ten title. That's fine, championship appearance, but I can show you 5 different teams right now that are better than that squad if they were to lose next week.
All right, I'm going to give. We've locked our man Chase out here, and it's not been intentional. So I want to give him a minute to speak. But I've got some stuff to prove your point. I've got a sheet that kind of scores wins. Okay, again, it's a point value system based on, what the point spreads would be if teams played. And again, you got to.
Oh, I know you come up with some interesting things.
Yeah,
I know you do.
And here's what I've got. Okay, here's how I've scored it. Georgia's win over Texas was actually, if you add in home field advantages, if you add in some other things, it's a little bit more. Georgia's win over Texas at Texas scored 63 on my scale. Clemson's win over Georgia's win, Clemson neutral site scored a 50. The win over Florida neutral site scored a 44. Auburn scored a 40. Kentucky there scored a 44. Here are the win scores I've got for Indiana. Michigan, their best one. That's a 39. But by this, and again, it's not my system. It's just using some stuff out there and making some.
Yeah, no, I get it.
Georgia's got 6 wins by that. If you adjust for home field, better than the best one that Indiana's got.
Right.
And I'm not picking on it. I would also put Indiana in the playoff if we did it today. Just to be clear, I just don't understand. I think that they have unfairly penalized the SEC, and let me give you Alabama, okay? Because I think this one's pretty loud too, and then I'm going to give Chase a minute to speak. But Alabama, here we go. Georgia at home, 55-point win. At LSU, 52-point win by my scoring system. At Wisconsin, 44. South Carolina, that was worth 48. Missouri, that was worth 43. Again, that's 5 wins better than anyone Indiana's got.
And that's where we're at the point right now, guys. I think, I'm into Chase thinks about this. I think we're at the point now where when we've got next week after that, 4 more rankings that are going to come out here. I look at it and I think, okay, if we're going by the metrics and we're going by, the eye test, I hate that freaking word, the eye test. Okay. Like I could give you an eye test on what we've done. By the way, Georgia, I called it this past weekend. I'm not trying to toot my own horn when I say that, you know me, but I'm saying if Georgia walked into Oxford and had first half Carson Beck. When I say first half Carson Beck, I'm talking about first half Carson Beck against Texas, first half Carson Beck against Alabama, first half Carson Beck against Florida. And then guess what we got? We got first half Carson Beck for pretty much the entire football game. And so I look at Georgia and I think, okay, this is not the same Georgia team, but it's still a good Georgia team. So I am the metrics point to it when we come to a system wise, guys. And I just think that right now, Ward Manuel and them are kind of flying by the seat of their pants. And if they're looking at this, hey, we're just going to judge it, we'll factor in a little bit of strength schedule, but we're going to judge about what we see on the field. Okay, I'll throw on it. Chase, what happens if Tennessee beats Georgia this weekend, but then only beats UTEP by 21 points next weekend? Like, you're going to penalize Tennessee because of, a 21-point win against UTEP? Like, we have no clear understanding of what the hell they are doing. And I think that's the problem and why questions have to be asked.
Yeah, I want to go to the comments here. By the way, drop your comments in super chat if you'd like to. We can get to those. We've had several folks in here talking, and the last Don here has been talking a lot about Texas. And he brings up a good point. This is where I want to go. Texas can make the playoffs without a ranked win, and he's got some other wins in here as well. Texas is one of the most interesting teams to me because they sit high here at number 3. They've beaten Vanderbilt. You could say that's one of the best wins on their schedule. Are they high enough to where if Texas loses another game that they're still in? And maybe it is the eye test for them, but strength of schedule is not there for Texas. Is Texas locked in? You feel like if even if they lose another game?
Man, if they go to A&M and lose that, which I can't wait for that game at A&M, by the way. I might just get there on Thanksgiving Day. But if they were to lose to A&M, and we let's just say it's a close game, whatever, it's a 7-10 point game, something like that, from where we have, if Texas were to win, okay, Texas were to win this week, next week, okay, get ready for that Thanksgiving Day, and they're ranked where they are currently, and you go to Texas A&M and lose, you got to keep Texas in the playoffs, because you've already set the precedent of, okay, if especially with strength of schedule, by the way, I'm factoring in Texas A&M strength of schedule and where they're ranked right now, blah, 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 blah. So you would have to keep Texas in the playoffs, because you're going on the road against a really good football team, in my opinion. And if you drop that game, so be it. But then I look at the rest of college football and how the committee has looked at this thing. And you can't tell me that Texas wouldn't be one of the 12 best teams in the country, even though they were to lose. What's going to happen if that happens? What's going to happen if that happens? Weird play on words here. Is that you're going to get somebody out of the SEC that you thought would go in and get into the playoffs. They're going to get dropped. They're going to get dropped out. And I don't know who that is. Is it Alabama? Is it Ole Miss? Is it Georgia? Is it Tennessee? One of those teams are going to get left out, because the committee, in my opinion, ain't putting 5 SEC teams into the playoffs. So which team drops out? So that's why, in my opinion, I think Texas is sitting kind of pretty right now, in a sense of don't lose any of the games left. Don't go to Arkansas and get trapped this weekend. You lose to Arkansas, you're done, period. But I'm saying that Texas A&M game is going to be massive for a lot of different reasons, not just because of the rivalry, but because of the SEC title game, but because of the college football playoff, and because who takes a drop, who has the furthest drop when it comes to ranking. So that's why Texas needs to continue what they're doing, Chris, to be in that spot where they're 3-4, where you're going to make the committee look like freaking idiots if you decide to drop them 8 or 9 spots out.
Trey, is Tennessee Georgia a loser's done game this weekend?
I hate to put it that way. So here, and that's a game I'm going to cover this weekend. I'm going to go back to the SEC. I've been kind of everywhere this year. I hate that because of okay. I'll give you. This is about to be if it happens, if Nico doesn't play, here's what's going to happen. This is a Jordan Travis reversal.
Yep.
So Tennessee goes on the road and loses to Georgia by 10 to 14 points, but they do it without their starting quarterback. Are you going to tell me that and I'm just saying like 10, 14 points. So it's a close game in the fourth quarter. Georgia scores a touchdown to kind of get away. By the way, Tennessee's defense is fantastic. It doesn't get enough attention. Whatever. I'm not going to get on that. I think that you look at it. I think if Tennessee beats Georgia, Georgia's done. If Georgia beats Tennessee, that playoff committee, they better factor in the point that Nico was not playing in that football game, because you set a precedent last year. Jordan Travis was done for the season. Nico would be back next weekend against UTEP and to finish off the season. So what I'm getting at here is that, okay, you can play that game, and if they were to lose, you could drop them from 7. I think the reasonable option, if Tennessee goes to Georgia, keeps it close, and loses with a backup, and I'm not saying they're going to play with a backup, but I'm saying if Gaston has to play, you drop Tennessee from like 7th to 13th, and then you still have the ability to make the playoffs with a little bit of chaos in front of them.
Yeah.
And so that's how I look at Georgia, Tennessee this weekend. But, Georgia's got to prove to me, Tennessee's rolling there with a defense that could eat Carson Beck alive. So Georgia's got to prove to me that they can do something when it comes to this offense right now that's become a little bit stagnant. And if not, things could go the other way in a hurry. So that's why I'm interested to see if Nico goes or not right now. Josh Heupel is being very cautious in what he says, but he's been out on the practice field, but it's not like he's a full go, going up against the number 1 defense over the last 2 days.
Yeah, the more I look at it, the one I've got a real problem with is Penn State.
Yeah.
Because I think, again, in Indiana, I could argue just based on not losing any games is, top 3 or 4 resume. Penn State does not have a top 3 or 4 resume, nor does it have a top, 3 or 4, 5 power ranking. They're 8th in resume, the 7th in resume by the one I've got, and 9th in power rankings. That's what I don't get. But
they had the same situation as Indiana. They had an opportunity to beat Ohio State, which was going to be the big game on their schedule, and they failed to win that game. Sure, they beat Washington. That's fine. But it feels like the same situation as Indiana, where you got one shot here. Yeah. So
and hey, look, in defense of undefeated teams, okay, you've seen it in the SEC. Week in and week out, there's more parity in college football. You can lose to somebody. I'm not necessarily against the one-loss grace thing. You've seen Alabama trip up to Vandy. You've seen Notre Dame trip up to Northern Illinois. I think they still have cases as playoff teams. It is
absolutely.
It's the inconsistency further down, and I am interested to see, does the bar shift? Eventually, the bar is going to shift to where 2 losses is okay, because all these teams are going to start playing each other soon enough between the last couple of weeks in the championship games, and that's going to cause a shift. But I just don't understand. It feels to me, and look, I don't even have a problem with them shifting the rankings at this point and doing things and saying, well, moving Indiana up. If you feel like Indiana needs to be there, I would rather them just say, hey, we goofed in our past rankings. We didn't value something, we're moving. I'd rather them do that now than the last ranking. I'm fine with that. It just feels to me like right or wrong, they made a move to put so much distance between the Big Ten and everybody else that now you lose a game. And of course, they did it to Georgia last week. Georgia dropped a ton of spots, but it whether it's intentional or not, it does feel like a move to put the Big Ten up there to where, okay, now you got more grace when you lose. Maybe you don't fall as many spots. I don't know.
And I'll kind of finish it with this too. It's Miami has been on the teetering edge of a loss for 4 weeks straight. I mean, let's be honest. That
Virginia one call Tech against game, Virginia Tech, and that would have been
right. That Virginia Tech game, it shoulda, woulda, coulda, but that should have been a loss to Virginia Tech. And then they go on the road and they struggled against Cal, and they came back in the second half in the fourth quarter, thanks to Cam Ward. I get it. God bless Cam Ward. I love watching him play. And then they catch an L to Georgia Tech because that defense has just been a wreck. Not trying to have to play on words with Georgia Tech here, but Miami's defense has been a wreck for the majority of the season, and they finally got gapped. So what happens when they get caught? So I'm just saying, you look at one-loss teams, Miami drops to where they drop, but you look at Georgia catching that second one, and they drop 9 spots.
Yep.
It's like if we're doing an eye test thing, Miami's defense has been terrible. So you're telling me that this team is national championship worthy, and you're going to keep them where they are ranked? Like they dropped 5 spots? It's like, okay, all right, that's fine. If you want to play it that way, and if the committee wants to do these eye test things and strength of schedule and whatnot, have at it. But I could easily throw at Miami the who have you played yet scenario, and go from there. So it's fascinating, Chris.
Chase, what have we missed here? Things that are pertinent to the discussion that we've not gotten into. I do have one we haven't gotten into in a minute, by the way.
Trying to think. Alabama. I mean, is Alabama a team that is? I don't know their path to the SEC championship, but do you feel like Alabama's in a good spot, even like with the Tennessee loss? If will they keep Tennessee in ahead of Alabama? Where does Alabama fit in, you think?
A team that, and I'm sitting here looking at the rankings right now, a team in Alabama that after that Vanderbilt loss, it kind of reminded me of Colorado, where I was like, after Colorado lost in Nebraska, I was like, all right, Colorado's done. And then I'll eat my crow here. Them boys have gone on a roll. They look good. They're coming back. I looked at Alabama after that Vanderbilt loss. I was like, all right, there's a lot of problems within that program. But then, you take care of a Missouri team, whatever. Missouri, Eli Drinkwitz can vouch for the playoffs, but I got a better shot to making the playoffs than Missouri does right now, unless somehow they sneak into some weird tiebreaker scenario. I think Alabama, they finally figured out that, you know what, Jalen Milroe's got some badass legs, and we got defenses that are struggling from side to side, so let's attack it. And I think what you saw out of Alabama was also him not relying on Ryan Williams every single time. I remember that Tennessee game, we threw the ball to him 19 times. It's like, dude, you got to be able to spread it out. So I think that's what you finally saw out of Alabama, and they just curb stomped LSU in Baton Rouge. So I think Alabama's kind of sitting pretty right now, to be honest with you. I think they're impressive wins. Now, you better go out and beat Mercer by 50 points on Saturday. Style points do matter right now. And then, yeah, right. And then you go to Oklahoma, which
it's not a
Oklahoma,
layup.
I mean, whatever. It's not a layup, but again, I think Alabama's defense is good enough to get after Jackson Arnold. And then you go play Auburn, which should be a win. So I think Alabama's sitting nice right now when it comes to the postseason. I just think they can't afford all hell breaking loose in front of them. And then we get that, Chase, like you brought up, that weird scenario with Texas and Texas A&M at the end of the season, stuff like that. So, and then you have to, and then what do you do about the Tennessee win over Alabama? If Tennessee's sitting there with 2 losses, okay, what about the head-to-head matchup? Like, there's so many different scenarios and how this is going to play out, but that's what I look at.
Chase, any parting thoughts? I've got to run on to the next thing. And by the way, I would love to try to do this again next week, maybe even live if we get a chance. Would have maybe done that last night, but we had a little matter of Kentucky and Duke going on. So Chase, I do want to say one more thing. I think Boise State, I guess it kind of doesn't matter because Boise State's the team that's going to get in. So I don't guess it really matters if you got them at 5 or 20 at this point. They're the highest ranked power conference team, but I thought they were overranked based on resume and strength overall. That was one other thing. I don't know that it matters much, but Chase, take us out here. Anything else of note here?
I mean, I don't think so of note. Just the fact that, I mean, there's a lot of football to be played, and this is going to change drastically. Probably even by next time we talk next Wednesday morning, that this is going to look totally different. But there's so much to learn. There's so much to figure out. What will conference championships mean? I think, and I think they've done a poor job of explaining that. So there's a lot of football to be played and a lot to learn. I'll just put it that way.
That's what I'm looking forward to. It's going to be a fun couple of weeks.
Yeah, my parting thought, I would like to see the strength of schedule measure they use somewhere. I think if that's going to be a part of the process, let's make it transparent and put that out there somewhere.
Well, call Ward Manuel and see if you can get a comment from him.
Well, yeah, I'll let you handle that, my man. But all right, thank you for watching. I think we'll try to do this again next week in some form or fashion. As the Georgia-Tennessee game, what happens out of that is going to be interesting. Plenty to unpack here. We cover baseball, football, basketball year-round here at Southeastern 16. If you haven't subscribed, hope you will. And leave us a thumbs up. That helps our analytics. For Trey Wallace of Outkick and Chase Robinson, my co-host here at Southeastern 16, thank you for watching us here at Southeastern 16, presented by BetOnline.